Peace and
Hello.
love. What it do? What's popping? What's cracking? What's happening in time 9 time 10? We in this piece with our special guest this afternoon. We usually do it, during the evening or whatnot. But we have our sister here, Veronica Gunn. Good day. How are you?
I am doing good. I turned 50 today. Emotionally, I still don't think I've reached even 16. But I think I'm getting up there. I think I'm getting up there with the maturity and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Okay. Now, I know you have a presence on TikTok. um, I could say a large presence because it's a lot of people on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not like avid, that's kind of outside of my realm a little bit dealing with the TikTok or whatever because it's so much. It's a lot. It's a lot of people and a lot of products available on TikTok. I know that, because I have some of those that other people have ordered from me because they like absolutely love TikTok.
Mhm.
So, I'm just not TikTok savvy. I'll put it that way. Like if it's someone, who I'm familiar with or whatnot, and somebody recommends, hey, you gotta see this, you gotta see this, that's how that comes about, with me. I'm getting a little bit older now, so certain things that, don't resonate with me because it just seems to have no scholarship backing it. And when I was tapped to, get acquainted with you, that wasn't the case, which is why you're here. A lot of, if not all, that I've heard from you has been on point, and even things that everybody, may not have a direct relation to it. But again, the way that you articulate it and convey the message, whether it's something that make us laugh, I mean, it's the same thing that you have certain comedians do, like Carson and even Cat Williams. It's like you putting some knowledge into it. You're just not attempting to make anybody uncomfortable for no reason. Like it's um, political in a sense as well. So um, let me back up a little bit because I got to talking because there's so much that I want you to be able to share. Um, let's where are you from originally?
Uh, so I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My mother was moved here when she was 17 or 18 from Germany, and my father was a black man from Little Rock, Arkansas, who met my mom in Germany and then moved her here. But they divorced. Then my mom moved us away from our black family, which caused a lot of harm into suburbia Washington, outside of Kirkland. And her mother was there. Her German mother was there. She had just moved to America, and her sisters were there. But then my father moved there to be in our lives. Moved to Kirkland, Washington. So I spent a great deal of my youth in suburbia Kirkland, Washington, which is now, there's no way we could afford it. The house that my parents actually bought is now I think for 950,000, and they bought it for like 70,000 back in the 80s, or 80,000 back in the 80s. So the totally different place, but still very white, very white suburbia. And then I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma for my last 2 years of high school, which was a very huge culture shock. And then once we graduated from high school, my parents divorced again, separated once we moved to Tulsa. He moved back to Arkansas. Then my mom moved us to Phoenix, where I spent most of my adulthood. Though I spent 4 of those years in Little Rock, Arkansas, after my mother passed away and when my dad was passing away. So right after she passed, I moved to Little Rock. Fell in love. That's why I stayed 3 years longer and then moved back to Arizona. It's hard to say where I'm from. because it's kind of like, I've lived in 3 states, 4 states by the time I was 18. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, we get you. Which, is a good thing, right? In some ways, because you get to have all these different experiences with people from, that may have different cultures or customs, but you know, I grew up in two different states too, so
Well, and I
um,
think also it really helped me at a young age physically see the racial elements of growing up and the differences. Tulsa and Kirkland, Washington, two totally, completely different places, and then Little Rock and Phoenix, Arizona, again, two totally different places. So it was now, including with my healing and my racial trauma healing, I reflect off a lot of those experience, because then I'm able to look at myself and say, okay, that's what happened, or I'm able to uh, in some way give comfort to that child who was traumatized with racism, either by being jumped, because I was jumped as a child, and other things. So it's provided me, I think, the experience I needed to give insight to some of my experiences and understand why I was going through those things.
okay, so tell us about some of your influences. Like we just had the little conversation before we got started, and I talked about the first conversation that we had, and I mentioned peace be upon her, Dr. Francis Cress Wilson. And when I said that, the conversation really just took off. And this, I'm talking about the first time that we talked on the phone, right? It's like you
Right.
named multiple other scholars that, reminded me that of some things. So, um, can you share that with the people?
Well, yeah, and I'm gonna start at this point. I feel, and what it appears looking at it in a perspective of spirituality, Black women have always been the givers of humanity and compassion, and we can see it today. We can go back ancient times, but we can look at it today and see what exactly Whitabetes is attacking. And Whitabetes is attacking the creators of humanity, the drivers of human culture, compassion and empathy. And as I was doing my mental health healing, there were always Black women that came across my path, and there was just this spirituality about them that calmed me, calmed my spirit, and I didn't realize that's what happened until later. And then I started getting into the books. I started getting into the books about white tea women, thinking I'm going to figure these white tea women out. But what ended up happening was I was figuring myself out. A lot of those behaviors I was doing, I was causing harm to monoracial Black women. I didn't know this. I was a Black person growing up with a white tea mom. I knew I was Black. It's different now. I mean, there was no biracial, you're Black. Okay, that's it. And a lot of times people thought I was adopted. So having a guide, scholarship, Dr. Joy DeGry, that really opened my mind up to a lot of the stuff that not just the community but is undercurrent in my life as a Black person, and the trauma. And we don't recognize, because we've never been able to recognize, especially as Black women, our trauma, and treat our trauma and have support for our trauma. You read books like They Were Her Property, and a Black enslaved woman, they said that she had, what did they call it? The sulks, after she lost her own child. A white tea woman, she gets the compassion and empathy, but a Black woman, we'll get rid of her since she can't, she's sulking. So I think all through history we see this pattern and this spirit where Black women are just not allowed to sit down and heal. They're not allowed to cry, not allowed to do any of that, and that stems back to them uh, turning us into their wealth, basically. So yeah, it's the reading of Black women, especially when it comes to history, has been right on point. And I know it's been right on point because I start, like, if I read The History of White Tea People by Nell Irvin Painter, she provides a good foundation of white people. You know, not getting too much in the details, but gives you a pretty good guide on how white tea people were created all the way up until today. And when you read that book, you can then go to other books that are written, that may be written by a white tea person. There's one I'm reading continuously. It's called White Trash, the 400-year Untold History of Class in America. That's a really good book on white tea people because it really does provide the details of how white tea people, their white tea experience with classism. Because we see a lot of times online, and this is why I really stress that book, is they want to equate classism with racism, and they don't even understand the bare minimum difference is you could change your class. You could always change your class. Just pull those bootstraps up. You know what I'm saying? But you can never change your race. Well, I mean, there's some people out there trying to, but a lot of these books provide insight to the behaviors of them today, and how it developed and where they came from. So that's in Black women, books written by Black women, especially when it comes to history, for myself, have been more consistent and don't contradict other history books or lessons I'm getting, if that makes sense.
Indeed. Indeed. So, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's, and again, I'm learning. I'm learning some things because uh being that, you had a mom that was German, your experiences aren't gonna necessarily, all of our experiences are gonna be different because we're our own individuals. But as far as this melanin that we carry, we know there are other obstacles in what we call North America, you know what I'm saying, that
Mm-hmm.
we have to deal with. Like you said, there was no, you're biracial. No, you a melanated woman or quote unquote Black woman or whatever they calling us within this 25 years span. You see, so yeah, yeah, definitely.
And I think also so for me and my Whitabetes treatment, it really started with my mental health, as a woman, as a woman who has trauma and whatever. Um, and then those skills I was able to use to then start the racial healing that I needed. I needed to be able to know certain terms, what I was doing, because I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and I finally was forced into help, and then I got this book years later. I'm like, everything that I've experienced that was going through my mind was in this book. And that's when I was like, okay, so books is the key. Because for me, reading about myself or reading about someone's particular behaviors or what they said today based on the history, it provides a resolve for me inside because now I know why. I know why they're doing it. I know where it comes from. I know why I did this. I know where it comes from. And I think that's really important. When people start their deconstruction, you have to do first your individual mental health healing, that provides those tools of rationalization, emotional, certain things that get kind of get thrown into this pot. And without a little bit of structure in those thoughts and knowing what those thoughts are and why you're doing it, it's going to be really hard to go into deconstruction, because deconstruction, a lot of it's emotional and mental.
Okay. Um, wow. I know the last book that we did mention was the medical apartheid in a
Oh,
delectable Negro and all of these, titles that I am familiar with. it's just hard to fathom that something like that could ever actually be real while it's happening around us right now. Just modified a little bit, maybe more regulated or less regulated or whatever legalese term that they attach to these things. You see, as far as not just in the medical field, but when it comes to um, the what we deem as law, what people follow, acts, codes, regulations, statutes, and things of that nature, our people kind of ignore how that plays a part in some of the situations that many of us, are facing, no matter what it is, right? From not just health situations, but financial woes and things of that nature. It's like they've already handed out a manual, a script, so to speak, and these are the rules. And if you don't abide by these rules, right, you're gonna be fined or imprisoned. And this the language that I talk with it, because this is what I've understood, because this is what I've seen, right?
Mhm.
For example, for me, when we bring up, talking about various states and which one is the more so-called racist or whatnot, Florida is takes the cake for me, right? Me living there as a child and a teenager, on and off, the things that I experienced there, me living specifically in Detroit, Michigan, I would have never experienced. And although there is some good, all the rest of it was just very racist. I'm gonna say what it is. Attending a 4% non-white school ain't
Mhm.
easy.
Mhm.
Understood. And that's where I was at, like literally my first day of school. I had never been on a school bus before, because our school in Detroit is walking distance, right? So I get on the bus, and it's literally only one other melanated child on the bus when I get on the bus. And the first thing the little white boy says to me is color time, right? And
Mhm.
everybody laughed, and I was piecing him up or whatnot, but he kept putting his book bag in front of him, so I didn't get him how I really wanted to get him. Like, I'm from a different place. Like,
Yeah.
it's very Detroit, and I'm gonna say this, is very unique in the way of many things, not just Motown and being the richest city in the 50s and the 60s, the richest city in the world, and things like this and that. What we had that not unless it's a city that's two times the population of us during the 80s and 90s, is we have like the largest percent of so-called black people. Like over 85% of the people that's here is not just black, but we haven't had a white mayor from 74 to 2014. That's a long time. You see, so it is. I'm from a different place. So you taking me as a child, as a teenager, and putting me somewhere like that experience. I have so many stories. You see, Ku Klux Klan came to my freshman year of high school. I started high school down there, and passed out brochures for the Ku Klux Klan.
Mhm.
It just happened to be one of the few days that I was absent. I wasn't there. I was there the next day, but it was still in the air. It was still a conversation, because this is the other thing about Florida. When I was there, 85% of Florida's population is not from Florida. So the few melanated other children that went to the school with me were from like Chicago, Brooklyn, New York,
Yeah.
things like this and that. So we had our own little clique. But again, it's less than 4% of us, right? Because when I say 4% non-white, it doesn't mean it's 4% so-called black. So I went through a lot down there. Just, yeah, I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, the
Crazy.
South is a different place. And if you look at their history, one interesting thing about Florida is they were actually the place where the first interracial marriage took place between a freed black woman and a conquistador. So that's and it was also supposedly the first Christian marriage on American soil. But Florida has a very it's a place of origin for a lot of things. I don't know too much about its specific history. I just know it's a huge part of perpetuating the Whitabetes and such. But yeah, that's a Florida's a tough place. I wonder if it has something to do with the heat and the humidity, because it seems like a lot of times I've noticed that the heat and humidity agitates people who have the pheomelanin, which is the orange and red uh, melanin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one thing that you brought up is the worship of the written word. That was the first tool that they used to get uh, to start the anti-blackness. A lot of people say Gomez de Zarawa created racism, but I would push back on that because racism developed over centuries, and he developed anti-blackness. Everything comes from anti-blackness, even them developing whiteness or whiteness. And it's very important at least for me, I separate the two because it doesn't make sense for racism, the whole construct, to have been created back in the 1500s. To me, it just didn't make sense because we're talking about medical racism, we're talking about scientific racism, educational racism. All these things have developed over time based off of anti-blackness, and then other races were included as time went on. But a lot of everything that they've done to create the system that feeds the illusion of white tea supremacy, the myth of white tea supremacy, started with worshiping the written word, with the Bible, with philosophers, with scientists, affluent scientists, people who have connections to affluent people, people that taught the monarchs. All these people contributed to creating this structure, and said it was science, and it wasn't. It was pure subjective. And if you read a lot of the books that I read, like the history of white tea people, it points out exactly what they said. Like, for instance, the standard of white beauty, it was very subjective. It had to actually do with a 13 or 14-year-old girl who was a sex trafficked through Northern Europe, and she died of venereal disease. And there's this guy that collected them and sent them off to the philosophers to be studied. And that's where people were getting these skulls from, was this one guy who was collecting them, and he had the money. So you have all these different parts of it working together to create this structure. It wasn't just Gomez de Zarawa, who he just basically laid the foundation. And everything's based off of anti-blackness. Everything is based off of anti-blackness, and measuring it on the surface, measuring it with the phenotype. But if you look at history and look at what a lot of them were writing, including Christopher Columbus, a lot of these people who were going and writing about what they were writing about when talking about indigenous people and African people, where they were humane, they were good natured, they were generous, they were to me, they were describing what humanity is, and they said that was a weakness. Here's the white tea privilege. But they claimed that the way that Africans and indigenous people welcomed them, they said that was a weakness, and then they literally were saying we could take advantage of these people. That's literally what they were saying. And then today we have people who see them as victorious. They're the good guys, they're the heroes, they're the creators of civilization. But when we go into history, we see in order to be civilized, you have to be complacent. They want you to be, quiet. Don't push against the dominant power, the Greeks and the Romans. But most important, it erases people. It erases culture. It erases the identity of people that were there. But that would be part of acknowledgement. So like in white tea privilege and in everyday instances, white tea people are acknowledged. They're acknowledged through history. They do demand us to give them acknowledgement for doing the bare minimum. The familiarity, when they watch movies, they want a white tea mermaid. Remember what happened with the Black Mermaid? They don't like that. They don't like anyone that does not represent them as the hero or the damsel in distress. The individuality, we find that in the white culture and their system. And we hear that all the time with, I never owned slaves, or, I don't say, I'm not racist, but my family is. I don't see color, these things, but we're talking about the system-ism. And it's very hard for them to get past that individuality because they have a right to comfort. And to them, being called a racist or participating in the myth of white supremacy makes them a bad person. And that's that dichotomy that they think of, the either or of white supremacy is, if I'm a racist, I'm a bad person. And because of that, it's hard for them to accept what we're really talking about. And when we get past all the racism, we're going to be facing anti-Blackness, because if everyone in the whole world says, okay, let's fix our anti-Blackness, everything else will, I believe, everything else will be corrected, because every community, every racialized community, every the white tea community they're all anti-Black. And that is actually what I do suggest the Bikuns, the biracial nation of confusion, that they need to understand what they're identifying with is whiteness and anti-Blackness. So a lot of our mothers will tell us, if we get made fun of for whatever reason, our white tea, and I'm only going to speak about white tea mothers, because we've seen a lot of difference between Black mothers who have a white husband and a child than a white tea mother. Yeah, there's some differences with identity and culture, because Black women are the perpetuators. They hold the culture. They keep the culture. And it's not all. I don't want to say all and whatever, but with white tea mothers, I noticed, like with mine and with other people, they tried to other us. Now, my mom said I was Black. She never used the biracial thing. That was never an identity. Maybe a descriptor, but not an identity. Whereas now people are really trying to embrace biracial as an identity. And it can't be. Yes. Yep. And the sick and twisted. So this is actually, in more details about this, what's really sick and twisted about this is so all these conditions that our communities have to live under, with the violence, with everything that they infected our communities with, they put us in desperate situations of survival. And in some of those cases, this way, yeah. Some of those cases, they actually paid mothers to do that with their kids, which I think to me is just extra diabolical. You know what I'm saying? To put people in that position to do stuff like that. It's horrible. The things that they've done. So this reminds me of Delectable Negro. One thing that we have to understand is, from the very beginning, when they saw African people, we were objects. We were to be conquered. We were to be controlled. We were to be tamed. And even to this day, they can't see our humanity. When they bring up the abolitionists, what they're talking about is the people that wanted a higher moral ground. They wanted to be the good whites. You listen to their speeches and you're like, well, wait a minute. They're not talking about my humanity. They're still saying I need to be a servant to them. All that has been hidden. Yes. Oh, and I love that. Because my videos usually get banned. A lot of my videos. So I'm on account number 6 on TikTok right now.
What?
Yeah, and I've only been on here for 2 years. Okay,
Wow.
I had one account banned twice in one day.
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
so when I do TikTok, it really is to give my community. I love that. Give my community laughter. That's first and foremost, is to make sure my community gets laughter for it, and then the education. But I really do want to work on the right to comfort. They have to get over it. You know what I'm saying? If I had to get over it, they have to get over it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So this, and the thing about that gets me about a lot of the history is, if we go way back, let me get the book here, to this history. Hold on. I don't know if you can see it. The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor. This is another good book just for foundational understanding. There's so many other books that are really that complement this book. But what we've learned is there's always been an intention to destroy Black people, to erase them from history. And when we look back at history, first we have to understand that the Catholic Church has a lot of records of us that they're not going to release. And what do they have in those records? Well, I believe they have in those records, first of all, actual history, all of missing pieces, but also how they infiltrated our communities. Awesome. Yes. So chapter 2, Ethiopia's daughter, that's the one that confirmed this is a spiritual thing, because it keeps repeating itself. Now, it doesn't look the same, but when I see this drive to create this biracial identity, because here's the thing, racism, the construct's not real, but the consequences are. So if you try to make a race without the same construct, it doesn't last. It doesn't make sense. All it does is just confuse people. You have to have an origin and a phenotype in order for a race category to exist. And you don't have an original phenotype of the biracials. You just don't. It's a descriptor. Yes. So listen, there is so much that I really want to learn more, about pre-colonization of Africa, and more history of America. But it's, for me, because I'm going to be honest with you, it's the white tea history that is so much more easier for me to understand. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, they want us to be confused and separate from whoever we're connected to, whatever. Even with them, they've always done that. That's actually who I look at to see how it's going, is what they did to each other before that, before they got to Africa. So the history is my love history. I love being able to say, you sound like that person. And just like with the blonde hair and blue eyes, well, that actually became popular with Hitler. That the original Caucasian, that identity that they stole, that person had chestnut hair, and I believe they had brown eyes as well. But that was not what Hitler ideology was for white and white beauty. That blonde hair, blue eyes is recent. That's in the last less than 100 years.
Right. Don't be distracted either by my little. I'm just throwing certain pics up that I see.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm getting used. So I get really. Listen, okay. Turning 50. This is my thing. Okay. I remember my dad. He didn't want to deal with it. We had a Nintendo, and he called it Indo-Tendo, and I tried to get him to play with me, but he didn't deal with it. So that's kind of what I feel with a lot of this stuff. I'm fascinated by it, but it's like almost scary, because it's like I got to know more shit, So, but yeah, I think books for me have been so priceless, because I've always wanting I have to put things together. I see patterns and I have to figure out why they're happening. And when you dive into things like interracial marriages, a lot of people don't realize that there were interracial marriages before the Civil War. White tea women been marrying black men forever. And in that history, there's never been a time where they fought for not even just their children, but for the black men. So that's something important. I do. You see how they were all over. Because now look at where he's actually. Yeah. I, when you listen to them, so recently, and I think honestly it's the ancestors that do this, but recently I've seen some white teen men talk about why they go with why they prefer black women. And both of these men, actually I think it was three of these men all said because of their spiritual connection. And when we flip everything white tea supremacy upside down, the person on top is going to be a black woman, because that's actually what the whole system's designed to destroy. And that's why I do the worship of the written word of black women, because for me, I have to start right side up instead of upside down, because their whole system, their whole way of thinking is very much. That's why I used to get really frustrated reading their history, because I'm like, a doctor, one of their doctors, okay, and you can get this from the book. I put it right here. White tea women, black men. I don't know if you can see it. Can't see it. Sorry, it's white, but it's White Tea Women, Black Men, Illicit Sex in the 19th Century South, by a white tea woman, Martha Hodes. In this book, she does provide a right to comfort. So I do try to warn people, if they want to read these books, you got to be aware of how of the Whitabetes. So she does not paint white tea woman in a picture of being the real aggressor in other ways. It's very light. But it's all in documentation, court papers, that these relationships were actually very normal. And the reason why no one had a problem with it is because the white tea woman would then become, after she married the enslaved black man, she would then become the property, not legal. In the wills, it said indentured servant, so she wasn't really a slave, and she could navigate by herself, something that enslaved people couldn't do. But she actually she would become enslaved to the white tea men that owned the black men, and then also the children would become property of that white tea man. So that white tea man had motivation to get those relationships going, and then of course they had to make another law saying that if she was coerced into doing it, then she would get her freedom. So it's a lot of their laws is just always to cover each other, always to cover the last one, cover the last one. And with this identity thing, I think it's very important that biracial people who want to identify as biracial, what they're doing is they're contributing to erasure. The first Egyptians, chapter 2 in the destruction of Black civilization, talks about the first Egyptians were the ones that were half and half. And they don't talk about Cleopatra's mom, because I believe she was a black woman. That's why they don't talk about her. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't just black men they were trying to erase. They literally want to erase the matriarchy that was a big part of those ancient civilizations. Black women were pharaohs as well. They were gods as well. So for me, it's important to flip everything upside down with history. And when you let them know with books like I'm also doing the Iceman Inheritance, and it's really about, let me see if you can see it. It's not so much a scholarly work. I don't know if you can see it. But it does talk about that aggression, the prehistoric sources of Western man's racism, sexism, and aggression. And, they come from the book is pointing to what a lot of people are saying. They have Neanderthalic genes, and that explains their lack of humanity. So, see, I keep yapping. You got to tell me when this,
Wait. I want to add this too for people who aren't big readers.
Mm.
There's a movie called A Quest for Fire, Radon Chong, and I don't know the other, that used to be in my conscious DVD book collection. Like if a person came and was like, well, just pick like 10, 20, good DVDs or whatever, and let me pick them, or you getting that one. You getting
Yeah.
that one. If you ever came to buy DVDs from me, you asked me to pick the DVDs for you back in the day. Like, it's people who would come and buy that exact same DVD over and over because they would give it to somebody else, or somebody else would ask to borrow it and never gave it back, or whatnot. So that's a good one.
Well, they're trying to reimagine all of that. They're saying Neanderthals did have some humanity and didn't eat each other. And that's you can't go back and reimagine your history that you were saying you know what I mean? You can't do that. But and I don't really get too much in all of that just because I'm a oncologist. I'm not a scientist or none of that. And I don't want to misinterpret anything, but what it looks like is Africans human, and there are different types of non-humans over there, and some mixture. It's all complicated, but not really. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you're really interested in that, it's complicated. I'm just really like, okay, yeah. Uh, so I think one of the important things about the Whitabetes is um the flip upside down. Hold on. Flipping everything upside down, as far as especially like beauty. And this is a good book, Fearing the Black Body. This is a really good book, and it talks about it talks about the systems, the policies, and everything. I haven't done the book study of it yet. I need to actually
What's
read
the
it
name
again.
of it and who's the author?
It's called Fearing the Black Body, Racial Origins of Fat Phobia. Is that better? Oh, is that better?
Yeah, yeah, I can see it, but we definitely
Okay.
can't see the author's name.
It is Sabrina Strings.
Thank you.
Yes. And in this picture, this is Sarah Bartman. I don't know if you're familiar with Sarah Bartman. Um, she was a black woman from South Africa that they trafficked through Europe. They put her in a case, a museum with body parts and other parts. And I do have to say, I actually blocked that part out when I was reading about her through it. I blocked that part out because can you imagine seeing someone like that and saying, well, let's cut her up and put her on display? Let's remove her reproduction organs so that everyone can see it. And that's literally how they saw, especially black women. And everything that black women were naturally, they condemned it and said they were medical conditions, including running away. Enslaved people trying to escape slavery were told by Cartwright, I think it was, drapetomania. Wanting to be free was a mental illness. And so that book, Fearing the Black Body, and then this one, Sarah Bartman and the Hottentot Venus, those give insight to
Mm-hmm.
that. Because the reality is, skinny is not healthy. It's not healthy.
Right.
And when you see them trying to that, and in the 80s, it was huge. The eating, not saying it's not huge now, but the eating disorders became really, really big, because they had to look at, they said skinny was normal, that's ideal, that's not. It's very unhealthy, for the most part. And there might be some people out there that are naturally skinny, but that's very, very unhealthy. A lot of those women have reproductive problems, because they don't have the fat to produce hormones. Stuff that I heard. I'm not an expert on it, but normal beauty is full-bodied. Normal beauty is not skinny. Is you know what I'm saying? It just hasn't proven to be that, because when you also look at people like Francois Bernier. He also contributed to anti-blackness, and creating white tea beauty. He literally said while this is just my opinion, it is the Black African girls who are the most beautiful. So a lot of these people creating this myth didn't even believe that myth. But yeah, we're always we're objects to them. My experience has been my mom's white tea friends or German friends wanting to touch my hair like I was an animal. People growing up, touching my skin, just really really weird stuff. But now that I'm learning history, I understand why. These people, listen, these are people whose medical professionals said that a white tea woman's baby could appear to be quote unquote Negro because she looked at a Black person while she was pregnant. This is their doctors. This is their experts. Okay. And when you start going into their foundation, we see why it's so why a lot of them are so fucked up now, because their system has always been unstable, never made sense, and it was always built around the patriarch. It was built for them to have property rights, not necessarily their women, but their wives would become property as well. The very beginning of America were white tea men paying for a white tea woman to come over to be wombs and comforts. That's what they were here for, but they all failed. Yeah, we need to get away from Western medicine. I believe. I believe that it is not for us. I don't think they have the capacity to really understand us. I think there's a lot of nefarious things going on with melanated Black people because of the melanin. They need melanin for sunscreen. They're saying it's, they get it from the plants and stuff like that. But, there's some things going on with missing Black people, way too many. And then all these things, coming up about the use of melanin and the price of melanin. I think also melanin contributes to spirituality, having depths and being connected. I don't think if you are with the orange and it's yellow and red, I call it the MasterCard phenotype. If you got that melanin, that feel melanin, I don't think you have the capacity to absorb spirituality. I think only those with yellow melanin, which is the brown and Black, have that capacity. And we see that mostly with Black women. We see that. I mean, I do, but I digress.
All right. Now going back to the Hottentot, Sarah
Yeah.
Bartman or whatnot, the picture that I was showing of Venus, the first to be, well, that's what they named the little statue that they found. But I'm just saying, the first to be worshipped as what we call God is that woman with that body shape. So usually, I don't know what happened in my slides, but Sarah Bartman is right next to that. That's usually the next slide. I don't know what then happened in the past, however many years or whatever, but I'm not seeing it here. But
One of
yeah.
the things that they tend to do is romanticize those experiences, which is really diabolical. There's in Delectable Negro, Mr. Woodard talks about a 6-year-old Igbo boy who ended up writing an autobiography, but it's really a timeline of how he was seasoned and consumed by whiteness, because he started out believing these white tea people that kidnapped him were going to eat him, and then at the end of the book he's proclaiming white tea men as the superior race over Africans. And white tea people love this autobiography because of that. They romanticize this boy's trauma, and you can only imagine what a little boy went through on those ships. But he avoided going downstairs on the ship because he became, as a little boy, as a youth, uh, companion for white teen men. That is what that book is about. Delectable Negro is really about black men and white teen men relationships. And I will tell you this, after reading that book, there's no way I can look at white teen men the same, because it doesn't just go into, so they talk about in the book, here, I'll show you, I don't know if you can see it, but in this book, it does talk about Nat Turner's consumption, but it really gets more into the spirituality. And once you start to see that spirituality, that will prevent you to looking at people differently, because they created this, what they call parasitism, where they make us believe that we're dependent on them. And they did that all through slavery times. They need us. They thought we would go extinct if we were freed. They literally wrote this stuff. And so they created these stereotypes, which actually was them projecting themselves onto us. Empty vessels. They have no historical, no history, no culture. That's what they were debating about, was that we didn't have any souls. They weren't debating about our liberation, our humanity. They were debating about that if we had souls or not. Humanity, and they're switching it around. They're saying you're not human. You're not human because you live in a community instead of individual collectivism. You know what I'm saying? You're not violent. You don't have current, all these things we didn't have, but they made it seem as if it was a bad thing. Yeah. But that comes from the acknowledgement part of that. We are taught our history begins as slaves. And they're taught their history begins as great conquerors and creators of Western civilization, which is false. It's complete false. And you only need a couple books to understand that. So, my whole thing is, and like I said, this Delectable Negro, the author actually passed away 6 months prior to the book being released. So it was finished. It was finished up with some of his people that he works with at the university. But it really gets into the spirituality the hunger white teen men, and he uses that word, that white teen men have for black men specifically. It talks about the corruption of manhood, and that manhood is closely connected to violence, because that's how white teen manhood was developed. It talks about a lot of things. It talks about the whole chapter of Nat Turner, but a lot of people, and I don't like when people pitch this book as in there's recipes in there. There's not recipes in here unless you're talking about the spiritual consumption, because that's really what it's about. Spiritual consumption. When they season us, now they're seasoning us with capitalism. They season us with trauma, poverty trauma, so that we are so hungry that we are going to forget about our community, forget our roots and their greatness, and we're going to focus on achieving and beating the game, play the game, and all that stuff. And all that happens is we just end up getting consumed. And it's a hard thing to break away. We got to survive. We got to work. We got to take care of our kids. We got all these things to do. But the reality is that's how they get us. Before segregation, we were doing it. We had our own stuff. We were building it, and they couldn't handle that. So they needed us to depend on that, not depend on them, but work for their institutions to distract us from building our communities. That is very intentional what they do. They're doing it with interracial relationships. We see more of those commercials. At one time, white teen men were all for the interracial relationships because it benefited them. Today, they're all for those interracial relationships because they see those children coming out of those relationships are anti-Black. And they contribute, and I'm talking about people like myself with a white parent, Black parent, contribute to erasure. We can look at Donna Summer and Diana Ross's grandchildren. There's no Blackness in them. But we can talk about Lemuel Haynes, who was a servant for a Quaker family, I believe, in the 1700s. He was likely, his mom was from an elite family, and it was common, and had a baby, and that baby was sent up north to be an indentured servant. That's what a lot of the white tea women from the elite planter class, and even the poor ones that had kids, they would send them up north so they could not be slaves, but be indentured servants. But it was also so they wouldn't put things together. So they wanted to hide the secret. But Lemuel Haynes was the first Black, I believe, Methodist preacher for an all-white church. And his history. Am I by myself? I don't know if I'm by myself. Well, I guess I can continue to tell you about Lemuel Haynes, but he would be an example of how erasure happens in our community, and we won't know about him unless we're. Oh, there you are. Sorry, I don't. Was that me?
No, it was
Okay.
me. I was attempting
Oh.
to. I did something wrong with the mouse. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, Lemuel Haynes. We don't hear about Lemuel Haynes, and the reason why is he is what I call the biracial, the ones that throughout history have chosen another path instead of fighting for the liberation of Black people. And like I said, we see it with Diana Ross and Donna Summer's grandchildren. They are no longer Black. So, and again, it's the intention. It's intentional, and it started thousands of years ago. The fear of being annihilated is in their system. There's a book called Dying of Whiteness that was written by a white guy. He actually, I don't know if you know Dr. Rashad Ritchie.
Yes.
He's actually on his show a lot. I don't know if you can't see that. Can't really see it. Sorry. It's called Dying of Whiteness. And this is actually gives a lot of insight into those rural white tea communities and what's going on with them. And really what he's saying is they live in an unfounded fear. They live in a perpetual state of unfounded fear. I believe it's even lower vibration than shame. I think from the very beginning, when you're seeing greatness like they did, I mean, the things that they saw back then, we can't even comprehend that existed, like electricity, right? Like we can never comprehend that, but there's evidence pointing that the Kemets and the Cushites had electricity. And then you look at people like Edison, these people went to Egypt. You know what I'm saying? These people were in a place where all that was being stolen from and all that. Yeah. And that is their problem. They need to humble. They know they know what happened. They know they cheated. They know they stole, but they want us to forget all that and let's start from zero. Well, we wouldn't ever be able to start from zero because we're way at negative 100. They don't know how to have humanity for us. They don't know empathy. And I think they're starting to realize that they are the bad guy in this story, or they've always known it, but they've never had accountability. Yourself for not coming to the when you feel him, but he still believes white Jesus. Yeah. That I think the first infection for us is religion. I read some stuff out of the slave Bible, and it sickens me because we still do it today. Some of us do that, and I just wish we knew that their whole intention was to separate us from that spiritual connection Black people have to everything. Once we start healing, we start connecting to each other. I mean, that's what I feel is going on. I think the more we let go of whiteness and dependence on whiteness and be able to identify it, we're going to become even stronger. But a lot of us are infected. You know, we got some type Bs, which is very dangerous for the community. Very dangerous for the community. So But like I said, I just really try to stick with the harvest, with the type A's, the white tea people that are forever causing us harm on the social media, and bringing awareness, because once we can start identifying these, what I call symptoms, then we can start not just healing ourselves, but protect ourselves from it, because there's a lot of infiltrating, a lot of illusions going on with white tea people and their deconstruction and their anti-racism. I don't believe any of it. At this point, I don't believe any of it, because all I see is exploiting. White tea people they like to hear about our trauma, but over and over and over and over again, it's like, I'm tired of it. You know what I'm saying? I'm tired of having to relive the same thing over and over again, because it's happening to our community every single day. Yeah, there's a creator called forgot his name. I don't really like to follow the ones that seem to be exploitive. I mean, there's some that I can get information of, even if they are exploiting and whatever. Jeff, Jeff from the End of Species. He's really opened my eyes with a lot of the indoctrination of Christianity. There's a book called The History of Jews and Black People that was distributed by the Nation of Islam. And I'm not promoting Nation of Islam or anything, but they do put out scholarship books. And this particular book is banned. You can't get it anywhere other than through them. Because it does give some insight to our history with them that we keep trying to learn, but we're being prohibited because they're a protected group of people, which is interesting, because my mom was a German Jew. Anyway, I digress. Well, I'm not going to get into that honky shit. But this is one of the first books I read, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, that showed me that I was the white people. That I was doing that same stuff that white women do to Black women in like workspaces and shows.
What was the name of the book, and who's the author?
Why I'm No Longer Talking. It says to white people about race, but it's whited out. And it's by Rennie Edo Lodge. I like this. It's actually a pretty easy read. So easy read for me means I don't need to go get a dictionary and try to figure out all these psycho terms and all of that stuff. This is a woman to woman type of book, right? So it's a good book. She talks about some histories, but she really talks about her experiences as well. And it says what white tea women need to stop doing. Yes, that's it. So it actually pointed out what I was doing as a Baicoon in one of the first books that got me on my road to treating my Baicoonery. Because I find it very harmful. It has been harmful in our community, and it's very important that I address some of us Baicoons that are causing a lot of harm to our communities. There is, and then, here, I'll throw this other book. So this is actually one of my favorite books right now. White Trash, The 400-Year Untold History of Class in America, by Nancy Asberg. Now, this is a white tea woman, and I haven't finished it, but what I love about this, and this is what I find a lot, especially with white tea women, they're not afraid to talk about white tea men in this book. White tea men starts out as a very bad, it's very clear who they are, and it's a very informative book, and it aligns with the history of white tea people by Nell Irvin Painter. Another book. This is also another good book, Killing the Black Body. This is also around Black women as well. I haven't read it all, but I was a former librarian, and I would recommend this book for understanding structural racism and such. and it's by Dorothy Roberts. She's a known historian. And then let me see. This book is one of my favorites. They Were Her Property by Stephanie Jones Rogers. This book is awesome. And the reason why it's awesome is because when I started understanding the spirit of white supremacy, history helps fill in those blanks. So, for instance, with transracial adoption, that comes from apprenticeships. So after we were freed, after Civil War, we were freed. White women did not have the ability to take care of themselves or their children. The men knew that, so they allowed them to have use apprenticeships to hold on to black little children, girls and boys. So they would be with them for 18 to 21 years under these apprenticeships. Now, they would hide these children from their parents. The parents would try to take them, go through the court, and the court would say, no, these white women are the better maternal providers, even though they knew that it was black women raising their children since the beginning of time. So they used the law, the worship of the written word, to hold on to these black children because they couldn't take care of themselves. Black parents had to steal children away from them. But this really shows the process of how they were just as violent, just as culpable during the slave trade, during trafficking. They were just as I wouldn't say more violent. I would say they did violence in a different way, like with nettleweed, and because the cowhide strap could cause damage, break the skin, where the nettleweed was just as effective, but it wouldn't cause harm to the skin. They were the ones that allowed black women who were enslaved to eat a little bit more if they were pregnant, because they saw the value of those children. Many of them sought out children and vulnerable enslaved people so that they could nurture them back to health and turn around and sell them off. So we see that type of behavior today, at least I do, with white women especially.
Well, pretty much. Just it's although this is not the topic of discussion, we see a lot of it on both ends of the spectrum. And what I mean by that is we start talking about plagiarism, right? And things of that nature, or probably not the proper term for me to use. Just I can make it simplistic, like Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy in Trading Places, like put certain things right in your face, and you don't even recognize really what's going on, because it's just like what you briefly mentioned earlier about these continuous commercials with these melanated women or men with not with people with recessive genes. We'll just say it like that. You
Yeah.
see, um, we can have the discussion of the negative birth rate on their end, and I would definitely throw in their business practices as a whole, whether we're talking about in the political science arena or whether we're talking about the various commercial presentments that are on record with how they do their commerce and things of that nature, that we don't consider when we look at one another, without realizing, without the population of people, there is no money. You understand that there is no way to make certain things happen. These things happen by way of pawns, if you will, right? People who, I don't even want to say go along to get along, but they really, have no knowledge of self, right? It's only
Yeah.
what's given. Whatever's given is what they covet. so to speak. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Everything else is, well, you crazy or you're talking crazy, and that can never happen. And what? You forgot how these people got into to power, how they began to control a lot of the resources of the earth. It
Hmm.
wasn't done in a friendly type of way, as to where anyone should think that anything that you got from them or that you think you got from them. We just talked about the plagiarism or whatnot, but I'm just saying, just repackaged and redesigned, but it's the same stuff. Again,
Exactly. It is. It is. And I think that's why I really, and so my journey began with a complete breakdown. I mean, like the worst case scenario of a breakdown happened where I finally saw the systemic problems. I was going through what Black women go through, with mental health, with everything. I didn't put it together until later, but those experiences after the breakdown traumatized me even further. But that's where the breakthrough came. And after I got to, I say point zero, which is basically getting to a point where I could function again, where I didn't have this overwhelming anxiety going to the grocery store. I had to kind of rebuild my thought process and all that again. So once I got to point zero, that's when the racial stuff started to I could be open to that. And the where I learned started was in Oregon, uh, which was built for white supremacy, and I was in the rural area, so it actually benefited me. First, I knew my power. I finally understood this power thing, with white people. I started to understand the spirituality with Blackness, and I realized that this whole time we've had the power, but they've used lies, deception, practices, behavioral practices that are very corrupt. And it's hard to untwine all of that. You know what I'm saying? It really can be very challenging to untwine all of that. But I tell you, it's been a relief to be able to say, okay, so you get this from this. This is why you're doing that. This is why you're doing that, because you feel like you need to live up to a certain standard that you guys will never be able to live up to. Their whole white supremacy is a myth. They've never look at the nuclear family. Look at the Menendez brothers. Menendez brothers were part of a nuclear family. You know, that white tea guy and woman that got caught cheating in the jumbotron, they came from nuclear families. So the nuclear family is just another. Yep. And see, I think people need to also understand that you can have those pictures of those people will identify them, but the newspaper clipping, a lot of times it'll say, we don't know who the people that did it are unidentified. That's part of their anonymity, of white supremacy and white culture, is they get the protection of a system to never name them in the records. I'm glad you brought that picture up. It's weird being able to see those pictures on here because I'm so used to TikTok restrictions, and you'll notice with some of the things I say, it's like, why are you saying that? It's because TikTok doesn't allow us to say white. On TikTok, we can't say white, can't say gun. And I guess now we can't say hate. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Exactly. Exactly. 100%. I love that. That's true. They've had to work really hard to make white tea. We know white tea people know who the blueprint is. We know that by their fashion, their culture comes from Black women. So it's just a matter of them just, they get so mad when you throw it in their face. They get so mad when I say, well, those long fingernails, that was Black women. You got that from Black women. That's where you got that from. Everything culturally significant to anybody comes from Black people, whether it's dancing, hair, and all of it. All comes from Black people. and they've worked hard to try to erase that. But if you look at, again, the history of white tea people by Nell Irvin Painter, you see that they ruined artwork, ancient Greek artwork, just to create this illusion that whiteness was godliness, and the ancient Greeks were, it's a whole illusion. It really is a whole illusion how I've been breaking it down. But that's also why I got to stay away from people. Like I like to be by myself because I can feel some of that, Whitabetes. I just get away.
My bad, I was muted.
Oh no, it's okay. Let me make sure I got this
Yeah,
up.
I understand. I'm a bit introverted myself, if you want to call it that. I don't know, but I'm never lonely by myself, so I don't.
Well, and I think especially Black people, Black women, we really need to put up these boundaries, because the reality and the big view of it is it's they're trying to consume our spirit. That's what they've always wanted. That's what they've always been jealous of, because when they described us, they just used words like magical. Their words are magical. And they're talking about how those words made them feel, which makes sense now that they didn't want us talking to each other, because what was coming out of Black women's mouth was magical. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying it was this, lightning and thunder. What I'm saying is it impacted those demons inside of them. And I say, we know this, the divine never goes after the demons. It's always the demons go after the divines. And if you look at it in that way, now that shit to me makes sense. Because why not share? Right? Why not share these resources? Africa is generous. They're very generous people. Why did you have to destroy so many civilizations just so that you can destroy the world? So I just, it's a very nasty spirit. Whitabetes is, and it's very destructive. So I try to keep my distance from the type A's especially, but if there's a type B, I got to keep myself away from that too. Because I'm easily influenced. Okay, I get influenced easily.
Yeah, in a nutshell, people seem to forget that karma is a universal law, right? So the energy, that's around you, and you're not thinking about their karmic debt or whatnot, so that's something to keep in mind. Like, for real, watch who you have around you.
You have to.
That
They are
energy.
energy vampires. They literally are energy vampires. And I'll say
Yes.
that all the way to my mom. When I would try to talk about something that happened to me, here comes this mom talking about, oh, I just feel so bad and what happened to me as a child. I'm just like, thanks, lady. You know what I mean? I love my mom. I don't ever want people to think I hate my mom. I love my mom, but my mom was a fucking racist. She was a German white tea woman. And when you learn about German culture, especially with Schmittler and stuff, I identified a lot of shit that stems from that dude. And she wanted to be with a black man. I found out that my grandfather was not enlisted, drafted into the Schnazis. He was a very abusive person. My mom had to go live with her aunt because of the abuse. But again, it's kind of what, when it comes to self-reflection, I'm like, okay, so did I do that? I got to self-reflect, because that whiteness, we don't notice it. We don't notice it. So yeah, those Germans are something else, because they don't like the German white tea people, don't like the American white tea people. Like, they didn't even think about us. They always talked about the American white tea people being lazy and all this. And then you read books like White Trash, you're like, oh, damn, they've always been lazy. So, that's just what the book says. This is what they said. This is what their scholars said. This is what their favorite president said about them. I'm just telling them. They thought y'all was a bunch of dregs of society. That's their words, not mine. I didn't say it. That's what they called y'all. They didn't even think they didn't even consider Southerners being white tea for the most part. They thought they were cannibals, which they were, with the institution of slavery. But yeah, listen, when you start giving them their history, that's when the Whitabetes start coming out. That's when they start being violent and all that kind of stuff. So they do not like being told their history.
Yeah, I mean, when you know it, because again, you mentioned cannibalism and the kidnapping that we call slavery or whatever that happened over here on this land. What comes to mind specifically when you start talking about cannibalism, there's a documentary called A Biography of America, right? And later on, you had Colin Farrell, whatever his name is, that was in the movie about Pocahontas and all. What was the name of it?
You talking about John Smith?
Yes, and
Okay.
Captain John Smith, the
Captain
slaves
John
we
Smith.
used to call him back in the day. But yeah, they mentioned that in the 1500s, many of the European nations that came, how they didn't have, it wasn't just about agriculture, right? And I'm going to say what it is that they didn't stress, which is what I was taught. If you don't have the science of how to purify water and preserve food, what are you going to eat? You see, so they would dig up the graves of their own right here and eat them, right? So if going back to the movies, it's A Biography of America, and oh my God, my memory, yeah, I'm definitely getting old, because if I gave you one DVD, I gave you the one with Colin Farrell in it, right? So, because they show the same thing. So here it is, you have a peer-reviewed biography called A Biography of America, and then you have a Hollywood studio film, you know what I'm saying, depicting some of these same things in that particular film, right? So it's, again, it's just I wouldn't call it a method to their madness, but it's sick is what it is. You think
It
that
is.
because you unveil something in a subliminal type manner that it justifies you tricking people, right? Not even tricking them, but letting them be misled. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you can turn around and say, well, it was there all the time. Just like law is supposed to be balanced. Anytime they insert something that's negative, they're also supposed to insert something that's positive. But when you got millions of statutes and codes and regulations and prohibitions and acts and all of this and all of that, telling you exactly where it's at and what the code is like, no. You know what I'm saying? No,
Mm-hmm.
it's too many of them.
Right.
Too many of them. And this is what has made this particular nation state the most wealthiest above all other nation states. When you look at the amount of people that they have, a population incarcerated here
Mm-hmm.
versus other nations that are larger, is no comparison. But again, if you make millions of laws or so-called laws, which who the hell needs millions of laws? Let's think about this logically. You see what I'm saying? Then
Yeah.
of course you invented a school to prison pipeline for those who are living in poverty, where if you got poverty, you're going to have crime, because you're going to have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of mentally ill people that are living in dire needs when it's enough for everybody. And they say, well, that's Marxism. I know you got all these labels for stuff, but you forgetting the fact that if we're talking about liberals or conservatives, you have neo-Nazi skinheads on both wings of the bird. So don't try to label me something that you have attempted to erroneously insert yourself into, not knowing that you the dinner.
Right.
So it's a lot. You talking about
It.
talking in circles, like we have to, because it's not just one particular sector of uh or corporate entity that's strictly for wealthy people remaining wealthy and becoming wealthier. You see what
Right.
I'm saying? In anti the people, we the people, which is what
Right.
your organic constitution starts off with: preamble, lawful consideration, it being a contract, and things of that.
Right.
But when we start having these conversations for people who don't read, who don't properly research search things to know the source of it. You see what I'm saying? It's
Right.
like it's hard to have a conversation.
It is.
And
It is. We call them. Those are intellectual blocks of Whitabetes, because when if we're having discourse like in a live or something, they're not even listening to what we're saying with the facts. They're waiting to respond. They're waiting to defend and deflect. And that is a huge problem, for me to keep having. I can't do those circular conversations. Like, I can't do it anymore, because it just frustrates me because they don't want to understand. And that's why, when it comes to having those debates and stuff, it's just more entertainment for me. It's not, because when I put in the actual effort, to treat them, it's always wasted. So I really just, I'll throw in a little bit here and I'll point some directions, recommend a book, but usually I stay away from people, unless they're really interested in treating their diabetes. Like, I really don't want to entertain people and walk them through their hand. I'm just here to say, I'm here to make you uncomfortable. I'm here to get your mind out of an individual mindset, point out the systems, but you're the one that has to do the work, because when you get underneath their, a lot of these people wanting to do this deconstruction work, you get a competition, which means the deconstruction is just pointless. If you're doing it to compete, if you're doing it to win, if you're doing it, because you now have a black partner, or you have a black kid, if you're doing it for all those reasons, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. The only reason you should be doing it is for humanity, and to learn to have humanity and empathy for people, because they've never learned. They've never learned to have, see us as humans. It's their history and their words and their doctrines. It's all for white men. When you go before Africa, before they get into Africa, they were doing it to their own people. They had cages in London, for some of the ill-mannered white people in there. They were branded. So a lot of that spirit, for me, it's just who they are. That aggression, the animalistic tendencies. I mean, they created torture devices. They created nuclear weapons. They created all these destructive things. Comes from them. So it is what it is. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And they get mad, but I mean, change it. They're now trying to change their name to non-practicing white, which is othering, which is racist. Like, come on, people, get it together. So yeah, it's fun. This work is very serious, but I like to have fun with it. Otherwise, I would be angry probably all the time. But I like to, give the book recommendations and do my book studies. The book studies are really meant for people who don't have time to read, who might be intimidated by the book because of the vocabulary and the subject matter. I try to avoid the trauma for my people because we already know what happened. We don't need the details. But it gives a good overview of what the book is about and what's in it. Because a lot of people will recommend books and they haven't even read the book. I'll say this book looks like it will fit your needs, but I haven't read it. But I won't recommend a book and say it's about this, and that if I haven't read it. Just like with Delectable Negro and people recommending that because it has recipes and it doesn't. It has a recipe when you're talking about spiritual consumption, seasoning with Christianity, fraternal brotherhood, a lot of ingredients that aren't like salt and pepper, but they are still ingredients. The violence is part of the seasoning, and all that is so that white people can consume us. Um, and we consume others as well, sadly. So that's what that book is about. I do recommend people read that book, The Delectable Negro. I
Sure.
can yap. I told you I can yap.
Nice little library over there.
Yes, you know what, I tell you what, books are very comforting to me because I'm going to get the truth. The books are always going to give me the truth.
Yeah. Well, when I seen you pull out the destruction of the black civilization, I definitely had to pull it down. There's a
Yes.
couple other books sitting on top of it.
Interesting.
I don't know if you can see that. That's J.A. Rogers,
100 amazing facts.
100 Amazing Facts About the Negro. Yeah.
I have about $3,500 worth of books in my cart for Amazon. Now there's some books. Which one is that?
Stolen Legacy.
Okay, I've seen that
It's
one.
light. By George G.M. James, Stolen Legacy.
Okay.
Yeah. Peace, peace.
Love and peace, sisters. Oh, love and peace. I love this little thing. One day, I'm gonna figure it out. See, I'm not really big on hosting lives. I just get really frustrated. I'll do my book presentations, but I really can't do those engagements. I could be on the panel because I can drop off at any time, but I cannot host those lives. Those lives, oh, they wear me out.
Yeah.
So I really just focus more on the videos and on the content. That's really where I get my support is from the videos. And those are just more fun, than anything, I think. I like to poke fun at them. I mean, they make it very easy for me, especially because I like to note, I have to point out patterns that could be part of, the head injuries I had as a child. But I notice these patterns, and that's why I can always connect it to whatever characteristic or symptom I say. And they suffer from whitecosis. That's one of my favorites is whitecosis, and they live in the white light zone. The white light zone is opposite of woke. They have or they live in the Whitabetic coma. That's a popular place for them. But it's usually a place to start so I can, point this out. They'll talk about how they're deconstructing, but they don't know the tenets of white tea privilege. Like, huh? So that's another frustrating thing with me is when I get on these lives. I'm like, well, I read these books, and whenever somebody does something, and it's like, do you know what deconstruction is? Like, you don't even know what deconstruction is. And that's really what's frustrating on these social media is because they're exploiting our shit again. Like, some of these white tea men on here, they will take from Black women what they're saying in their platform, block them once they got what they want, and then duplicate it, and then you see they don't follow anyone as if they had that original thought. Like, dude, come on now. Y'all have never had original thought, especially when it comes to deconstruction and anti-racism. Never, especially white tea men. This is what it is for me is a distraction and diversion from our community. Jim Jones, what I call Jim Jones variant, I'm sure you remember who Jim Jones was, a Kool-Aid man in South America who the majority of the people that went down there were Black women. He exploited Black women and Black children. It was horrible, but that's who I call a lot of these larger content creators, these white tea content creators, because they're not in it really to make any change. Because if they did, they would lose their financial opportunities. And several of them have said it in different ways, but I caught them. But, they got like 9 million followers. And sadly, most of us are following them. And it's just like, oh, well, that jolly guy is not so jolly. Yeah.
I'm late, but there you go.
Yep.
Jim Jones.
Yeah, he was on heavy drugs. And the people, and they don't talk about this, but there is a documentary, I think on Netflix, of the women behind it. They were the ones who made the Kool-Aid and put the drugs in it. But they also kept him high. He was always high on some shit because of these four white tea women. So that's really, that's another part of that story, that white tea women are protected from, is knowing that they had a huge hand in that, in that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Some children from here, I'm saying children, they would have to be at the very least maybe like 10 years older than me, but yeah, who, went to, was it Guyana? Where did they go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
Guyana.
uh-huh. And my sister-in-law, who shares a birthday with you, for years, she knew those particular people or whatever. So I have been trying to get her to come on here for years and, kind of talk about that situation, because I actually did a broadcast and I named it something about drinking the Jim Jones Kool-Aid or something like that or whatever. So from that point on, she informed me of, what she knew or whatever. So I'm like, yeah, you definitely got to come through and talk about that. It'll
Yeah,
happen.
it's a very, very important story.
You know
Uh,
why?
because I think one of the most important things for me was seeing that he knows that, the power of Black women and their spirituality. They definitely target. I mean, Spelman. I don't know if you knew this. Spelman was founded by YT women. And one of their goals was to train Black women to be missionaries to go over to Congo. So this was in the early 1900s. So this is that self-consumption that they have us do. Instead of them going over to Africa to convert, do missionary work, they send us over there, specifically Black women to over there, because we they look like us. We're you, and that's a tool. They used us to consume each other. That's an act, when they try to convert us, that's consumption. And then we see where Congo is today. So they always try to put us in their crime so that they can say, see, we're all doing it. We're all part of it, like they do with slavery. Oh, you sold your own. And the other one thing that they don't realize, there was a difference between ancient slavery and chattel slavery. Ancient slavery, people typically had human rights. That wasn't a lifelong being bound. They could get married. They were treated like humans. Chattel slavery, they were treated like cattle. So people aren't able to differentiate the two, specifically the people that say, well, you guys sold your own. We didn't know what we were selling them to, and it was forced, simply put. Yeah, Rockefeller's wife. Yep, that's exactly Spelman. Yep, they named a Black women's college after a white woman. Colonization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lots of work went into it.
Yeah, I mean, we can go from Susan B. Anthony to Margaret Sanger, or however you say her name. I always mess it up.
Yeah. I really and for me, and I'm not saying everybody needs to do this, okay? I'm just speaking for my mental health. I don't fuck with any of them. It's very hard for me because I'm in Portland, Oregon, where the liberalism is, and I've seen the liberals be the most racist. White
Mm-hmm.
be the most racist. So for me, I build this, this protection around me. And ironically, having the houseless situation has been somewhat good for mental health because I don't have to deal with people all the time. You know what I'm saying? I'm in the safety of my car when I'm not, when I don't have enough for a room, but it's actually giving me more space to do the work and understanding, because I'm not constantly being bombarded with that honky shit. Yeah. Uh, I tell you what, it's I don't stand up whenever all of these groups suck on your energy and virtues, like you stated. Yep, they do. Uh, they do. And very, very projective. They told us who they were when they projected stuff on us. When whatever they told us we were, that was who they were. And that's just what I've been finding out. When you look at the history, when they said something about idle hands make the devil's work. Well, they were getting free labor. They weren't working, which means they were doing the devil's work. But they tried to project that onto us. Yes. A lot of those songs, I'm going to say mostly all of those songs made back then, the origins are stemmed in anti-blackness and racism. That was their whole identity, was owning slaves. Their whole identity was owning slaves. So, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of hunk shit going on in those songs, I'll tell you what.
It's just funny how certain pictures keep popping up. As soon as I took it off and pressed the arrow, this is what came up. We already saw one picture of them earlier this evening.
Mm.
All right, so take it how you will. It just is what it is. And like you say, they try to portray it as though this hasn't been happening for centuries and longer, beyond, because in all honesty, when you look at the one monarch, that's the big monarch that we all know of, talking about who is he, King Charles now? He's no longer Prince Charles or whatever and whatnot. It was even going on back then, because this is how many of these families became heirs to thrones and heirs to estates. It was many ways that this was done. So again, some of us have a different point of view based off our own personal experience of what we actually saw and experienced. And for me, originally and predominantly being from Detroit, this is where I spent most of my life. Again, me going to the South, I understood, like, for example, Florida is a football state. Like, Florida literally didn't get a basketball team till 1986 or something like that. I think that's when the Miami Heat started a basketball team or something. I mean, Florida's a football state, and I'm saying this to say that many of the young men down there who played football in high school, right, who you knew was going to either go be a Seminole, or if he wasn't going to be a Seminole, a Hurricane, or a what's the other one, Seminoles, or a Gator. They played football good. They could have been the Spartan or Wolverine or anything, right? But the white girls would flock to them brothers. Do you hear me? Have them on lock, like lock, and by the 11th grade. I'm not talking a freshman year of college or nothing like that. I'm talking about actually in high school. They knew who they football stars was already gonna be. So with that being said, me looking like mama and all, when I came down there, a lot of those same young men were attracted to me, right? So the white girls didn't like me. I just put it like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm, a threat to your situation or whatnot. But I'm just saying, I saw it up close and personal. Something, again, I would have never experienced up here. So it's just different, real different. Like, those young men having to deal with that young woman's parents. When again, I said that is the most racist place I ever been to in my life is Florida.
Yeah.
And it's a very small amount of states that I haven't been to. You see, so me saying that, like Ohio, especially traveling down 75 on your way to Georgia or Florida or Tennessee, Kentucky, things like this and that, like they just as bad, but it's just something about Florida that is extra,
Mhm.
especially when you're dealing with their so-called law enforcement. Oh my God, they terrible down there.
Yeah, I hear.
People
I
come up
hear.
missing still to this day. Melanated people come up missing on the side of the road and don't nobody know what happened. They
Mm,
probably have worse sundown towns than any other state.
right.
Now, don't quote me on it, but I wouldn't doubt it based off
Yeah,
of what I know and what I experienced while I was down there. Like, it's a whole different world, for real.
I believe
And
it. I believe it.
the Ku Klux Klan could come to your school and pass out brochures. Like, come on now.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up athletes, and I think people again need to understand not just the history, but that spiritual connection of white tea people wanting the best athlete on the block. That is the same thing as what. And I grew up with those white tea girls, and I was as in my 20s. I hung out with the YT girls, and all they said was, "I wouldn't f with that person unless f with that n word unless he had some money or was an athlete." That literally say that, and that stems from, and even I'm sad to say, but the professional sports institution is another form of slavery. That capitalism, the money covers it up, gives it the cherries and stuff. But when you dig under it and see some of these athletes, which I did in real life, these are miserable people. Michael Jordan had a horrible drinking habit and gambling habit. So if he was so happy in that situation, why did he have all these habits? You know what I mean? So um, they are doing what they've always done, and they need to find their provider, and having a black man as a provider is the best thing for them because they're always going to have that power over them, something they don't have with white tea men. White men, sorry, I keep using the TikTok words.
Wow. Definitely. That is, yeah, just looking at the psychological aspects of what you just said is crazy.
It is. It is. And children, us biracial children, black biracial children with especially white moms, we are accessories. They wanted someone that looked like us. My mom read a book, and in the book there was an illustration of someone she says looked like me. Mind you, she was a child, and when she saw that picture, she said, "I want to have a little dolly that looks like that." And obviously, I didn't know what that was. It just never set right. Like, why doesn't that feel good? You know what I mean? Why doesn't that make me feel good? And then I found out later that my mom, I was an accessory to her. I was an accessory, and it's true. Those German women over there actually targeted black military people over in Germany during the Vietnam War. They were the heroes. They were the good guys, and so they've always targeted black men. And my mom was one of those men, one of those women. So
What can I say? It's just a lot. Just
it is.
and
It
I
is.
can imagine that you have even more um, to share on this particular topic with the people, and it's very interesting. Like again, looking at your TikTok presence and how you had to um, submit things, right, or
Mm,
portray them a little bit to. It's like you really, really want to talk about this, but you have to be careful with how you say certain things on TikTok and on all of these platforms currently or whatnot. But again, the way that you chose to do your content on there is I'll say it's refreshing than the same stance that most people, I ain't gonna say most because we are, kind of different or whatnot, but when it comes to dealing with racism or whatnot, how it's approached and difficult to approach when you're coming from a place of anger. I mean, I'm not going to, a lot of this stuff, if not all, makes me upset, but you have to be of sound mind to come to some type of remedy or resolution as to not just how to deal with it, but how to end it. You see what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so
Yeah.
just in the midst of that, being able to make people laugh with facts, I know how difficult that can be. Some of the things that we know are fact. After we say them, we have to kind of laugh, like, because it's unbelievable. Like,
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, knowing the kind of harms and mental health issues that these types of environments cause is like we have to get to some remedy. It just can't be okay. Is there? We know is there. How do we heal? So yeah, yeah.
And I'm going to say this, we heal with validation. That's a good part. This is a book, a guide to Black mental health. This actually was a really good book for me validating and putting the beginning of putting the racial stuff together, because my mentor, Mr. Bobby Fother, he said, because I was always crying. I was working for the state. I'm like, why are they, all sorts of toxic behaviors, racially toxic behaviors. And he said, because they want you dead. That's it. They want you gone. They don't want you here. They want to break you. They want to consume you. They don't want you here. And once that was said, it was like everything else clicked. Then it was just like, okay, so now I understand this now. And I didn't care about anything else but bringing awareness to my people and understanding what the Whitabetes really was. Yeah.
Right. All right. You want to plug anything before we, wind it down and get up out of here?
Yeah, so
TikTok, TikTok. But
this is the introduction to Whitabetes. This is the book I wrote with friend Nisi KK. She's actually in Florida, and she helped put the book together, and it's available on Amazon. I also have what I call, it's a racial glossary, racial literacy tool, because they always like to have they always like to bring up the definitions. Now this does have the definitions in the back, but the glossary racial literacy tool also has some quick references, like things you can do to push back against certain things. But this is the Whitabetes. This is what the Whitabetes is, the spirit of Whitabetes. It talks about the emotional mental blocks. I put it just in a different frame than the typical thing. I put it in a way where it's an illness. It's Whitabetes, because people die of diabetes all the time. Well, people have been dying of Whitabetes for thousands of years. And it does talk about, type B, non-racialized people, and how that looks. It comes from type A. So I don't really like to put a lot of emphasis on type B, other than other racialized group, not my people, because it's all built to destroy us. They're all used to destroy us. So this just gives you a basic understanding of the Whitabetes and the spirit of white tea supremacy, which is available on Amazon. And I am working on a new one that's going to be focused on the white tea woman strain I call the womb of Satan.
well, okay. A lot, a lot. But again, once it's broken down into verifiable facts and things of that nature, again, worth the read, I'm sure.
It's fun. I think
Yeah.
my people really enjoy the acknowledgments. I am not going to tell you what is in the acknowledgments, but I like to just say we are creative. bunch of people. While they're still calling us N-words, we have hundreds of descriptors that we've used. So I love my people. We are creative, we are brilliant, and if it wasn't for my people, I would not be here right now. That's what I'll say.
Yes, the ancestors will do it.
Every
They be
time.
talking about won't he do it? The ancestors will do it.
Every time. Every time. There's a reason why they didn't want us to pray to ancestors. You know, we have to look at everything they told us was evil and we have to flip it upside down. And that's the easiest way to put it. You know what I'm saying? They've built this whole system to destroy black women, and that's why you have to read some of these books, because it targeted black women because they are the givers and creators of humanity, and white supremacy is anti-humanity. So, yeah.
Facts. Absolute facts. I don't know if you want to put your TikTok in the chat.
I can. Let me see here. Hold on. I think I actually.
Maybe I could do it. I think I can do it because it's Wait a minute. Let me find it right quick. I should have it. I got it. I think I type it in, but all right.
Yeah, it's CB underscore Whitabetes. I have two accounts, CB underscore Whitabetes1 and CB underscore Whitabetes2. I am always crowdfunding. A lot of the money goes to staying in the extended stay where I can relax and have Wi-Fi, consistent Wi-Fi. But most importantly, insulated against the Portland honkies out there that are wild. But I also use it to buy books, lots of notebooks and pens. I use a lot of notebooks because I do the book studies and make notes. Then I go back and make questions, and then I answer them, and then I do the live out there. So the books always go to providing literacy skills and promotions and Whitabetes therapy.
Mm-hmm. Well, we greatly appreciate all your efforts and want you to keep up the good work.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Listen, I'm going to tell you, I do it, even though there's education in there, the joy really comes from my people. You know what I'm saying? Because we're on these TikTok streets and out in real life, and we're just getting beat and abused and killed. It's like if the very least I can do is make my people laugh, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do at the expense of the honkies. I don't enjoy it. It gives me joy. It really gives me joy.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is different right now. This current climate. Yeah. Trump being as so far any credible sources that I've seen, as far as is his pedigree or nationality, he's German, right? And looking at the fact that his wives, who he chose, you know what I'm saying, are from over there too. So it's yeah, I'm just looking at things from all aspects. People think like I have this disdain, hate specifically for Trump or Republicans or whatnot, but those are people. It just shows how we as a people, a lot of us have selective memory. Sometimes I'll say amnesia, but the selective memory, because it don't matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican. If you're sitting in that Oval Office and you're not balancing the books by way of cutting the checks, I'm going to drag you. I don't care, right? But it's this super love for Donald Trump, like he cut the reparations checks or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm so not.
Yeah. It's wanting the good, and that's what it comes from. It doesn't come from a history of being good. It comes from we want to believe, we hope, and it's like first of all, putting Donald Trump in a position and you're saying that only he can save us, that's white supremacy. That's one of the characteristics. Only this person is capable of doing it. But I think really when you get down to it, when Black people are voting for that, again, I'm going to go ahead and say it, they are also voting for anti-Black women. All through society, all through history, it has always been Black women that has provided solutions to society's problems, always has. And as soon as everyone can admit that, recognize it, then some stuff can happen. But that's the last thing people want to admit, that it's actually been Black women who has been in charge of all this, or, influencing all this, the solutions and stuff.
Yeah, and it's a lot. It's the following of the algorithm, whatever is the most popular topics, or the general consensus of the internet people, or what I'm saying. It's like people have lost the desire to even want to know the truth, although they think that they're talking about the truth because it came off the internet, or because somebody who has maybe celebrity status makes a particular statement. Like, that's not how scholarship works, right? So I don't know. I be all over the place. I know I be all over the place, but point being is, we have to have some type of cohesiveness with what we're doing, and be able to point out those who are dealing with pseudo information. Let's just really, I got my own areas of expertise, and at the same time, I never claim to know everything. Like, those are the people, the idiots, the people who get out here and profess and act like they know everything. Literally, like this guru or somebody. Even we gotta, the egos and things of that is just. Although I know that an ego is needed, but your ego is for you. You know what I'm saying? It's for you. It's to help you. It's just like a fear mechanism or whatever. You don't have to lay that shit on so thick, excuse my language, but you see what I'm saying? Like, just a lot. Got some things that have to be moved out the way, because it's killing the credibility of those of us who are sincere with whatever we're lecturing to the people about, So it's like my greatest concern. And one more question. You got a cash app? What's your cash?
I do. It's Crazy Black Librarian 1. All one word. Crazy Black Librarian 1. I am thinking of changing the Crazy Black Librarian because, some very smart people came and they're like, that's a little ableist, but I'm still wrestling with it. They called me crazy my whole life, and I was known as the Black Librarian. So, I don't know. I'm still working on it, but that's my cash app, Crazy Black Librarian 1. And thank you so much for having me. I was so nervous. This is my first one. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to somebody about it. So I appreciate you having me here.
Appreciate you being here, and like I said, we'll get to do this again.
Oh yeah,
sure. Yep. All right. Remember, you said that.
I will. I'll remember you. See, I'll remember you because you're my first, right? So it's going to be very easy to remember you, because I don't have a good memory. I'm going to be honest. I don't work hard on my memory and remembering stuff. But that's my right. As an old person, I get to do that now. I don't have to remember shit. Okay?
Hey, look here. I'm sitting here to struggling to think of stuff too, but it is what it is. It's the best you can do is to, become vintage, right?
Yes, I like that. I'm vintage. Okay.
Right. As opposed to being young and, having to find your way because you don't know no better versus, you got some knowledge under your belt and,
Right.
you can pass it along if nothing else. So,
Yep.
yeah, sure. Okay. I don't have my glasses on and this screen on this secondary monitor where it's showing us that it's so small. I know how to kill two birds with one stone. But anything else you want to promote or mention?
No, I mean,
Anything good?
I honestly, I'm really one of those people that this is what I have. If you want it, I'm here for you, but I'm not, I'm really anxious even about breaking the 10,000 mark on followers. I like the intimacy of people. I like to be able to talk and know who I'm talking to. So I'm on IG, Whitabetes Foundation's on IG and YouTube. I try to stick my the videos that get violated on the YouTube and the IG because they don't, for some reason, don't get violated on there. But yeah, I just enjoy making my people laugh and bringing some education with it.
For sure. I done spelled librarian wrong and everything. I'm looking at your Cash App now.
Oh,
My bad.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Again, I'll just message it to you because I have all these ways to communicate with people and I'm only so limited. I don't even realize sometimes. All right, that's the Cash App. Crazy Black Librarian one, yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm trying it again, but yeah, I'll be able to again because I'm planning on fixing a thumbnail too. So when I go back, I'll put your stuff in the description or whatnot. Because like I said, a lot of my people is late night, midnight people. So yeah, they'll catch up.
I get it. Well, I appreciate it, all your support, and thank you for having me on here and getting me warmed up to talking to people on a serious note about this. Because usually when I'm on TikTok, I got my glasses on and I'm doing the whole character. So it's nice to come out of the character and be able to talk about it on the real. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And again, we look forward to having you again in the future. You enjoy the rest of your born day and have you some fun. Relax.
I will.
All right.
YouTube, you fools try to limit me. Muting and deleting channels, thinking that's the end of me. Y'all are not on my level, smaller than a centipede. This is my purpose, TBT is a ministry. I do not tire, my God gives me energy. Chose by Messiah, you believe, come get with me. Married to a black queen, we got the illest chemistry. Founded the Black Tube, and now we making history. Black Tube, 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 what? Black Tube, 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 what? TBT, 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 what? TBT, 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 what? TheBlackTube.com. I'm a giant killer, son of an omniscient God who's realer. If this be the thriller in Manila, I'm Ali in his prime. It's showtime, go time, about to take what's mine. We are not with your agenda. We showing real.